All right, everyone, welcome to the Safe Spaces Pod. Today we're joined by Arthur Long and government's on with me. So excited to get into it. Arthur, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me on, guys. So I'm a sophomore, second year at the University of Chicago. I play football here, and I am a staff writer for Chicago's conservative and libertarian newspaper, the Chicago Thinker. Was born and raised in New York City. Got a lot of exposure to liberal politics at a young age. Lived there for 16 years, and now I live just outside New York City in Westchester, New York. And really excited to be on the podcast and talk with you guys.
So yeah, we're happy to have you. Government, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, just in a general sense, what's going on with Chicago right now? Is it still the state of the Middle East, also known as Chirac, or it's cleaned itself up a little bit, or what?
Yeah, no, not much change there. So particularly with Chicago, it's pretty upsetting, frustrating topic that I mean, a lot of people, even conservatives, I think, don't speak super strongly about and really propose things to affect change. We've had last year, so 2021, we had 3 Chicago students shot and killed over the course of the year. We had a grad student who was carjacked early on. He was killed. They took his car. And then over the summer, there's a junior who was working at an internship down in the Chicago Loop, was taking the subway back and caught a stray bullet to his neck. And then later in the year, there was a recent graduate who was robbed at gunpoint. They took his phone and then they shot him and killed him. So, it's not changing. Chicago's very reflective and kind of sets the tone of the way the rest of the country is with crime. And as long as Lightfoot's in charge and you have DAs who get rid of bail and don't prosecute violent offenders and don't hand out heavy sentences, this is going to continue.
So first of all, that's horrible. And I've more than a few things to say about Mrs. Lightfoot. But what do you think the school, like Chicago, I'm sure Chicago's trying to take steps to make you guys feel a bit safer, but what do you think Chicago should be doing if they're not doing anything in terms of safety?
Yeah, very good question. So the thing with Chicago is obviously it's got the worst kept secret here. We have a beautiful campus, all this Gothic architecture. I mean, I think it's one of the most beautiful college campuses in the country, but you step foot right off campus and it looks like a third world country, and it has the violence of a third world country. The university really tiptoes around the fact that it's super dangerous. They don't really advertise it. They don't speak out about it. And the steps they take are pretty minuscule. They implemented this Lyft program. So just like Uber, it's Lyft. Where on weekends after 5 p.m., if you're in the Hyde Park, which is the neighborhood we're in, if you can get free Lyft rides then. And they've slightly, I think, increased patrolling. We have blue lights, lamp posts, which you can hit. But I mean, all the students know none of this actually really does a thing. And at the same time, you have lots of students. I wouldn't say all the students know this doesn't do a thing, but you have lots of students who are, all cops are bastards, defund the police, and just kind of screaming from the rooftops that police are not the answer. And if you look at every statistic across America, the way to reduce violent crime is to put more police on the street and have good police and have well-trained police. So it's a real battle, and it's a battle that we're losing right now. And it's sad because it costs lives.
Right. And Francisco, I don't mean to like overtake this too much, but Arthur, I don't know if you know this, but I'm like on the left, and okay. I'm one of, I don't know, like I'm pretty moderate, but when it comes to like ACAB, especially with all that blowing up, I was like one of the few people that I knew where I was like, I think we should just throw way more money at the police. Like it should be so much harder to become a cop and like take so much more training, because then you'll get better police officers. I know there are other things that you can do to reduce crime, like better education and stuff like that. But the most realistic thing I feel like, or the most, like the way to see the most immediate change would definitely be make being a cop harder.
100,000,000%. Like Jocko talks about that a lot. Like cops should be training 4 days a week. Like the fact that there's a stereotype around cops that they go to the donut shop and drink coffee and eat a lot of like bad food for them. Like there's some truth behind it, and it's dangerous because that also costs lives. Like the fact that our police force isn't held to a higher standard is a little upsetting.
I agree. And policing certainly is a multifaceted issue, and there are definitely more than one avenue which needs to be approached and corrected. But it's completely nonsensical that if you want a better product, you're going to spend less money funding it. It makes no sense to me. I completely agree. If we want well-trained and shape officers who know how to deal with a variety of situations, we're going to pay for more training, for classes that educate them on a variety of situations. A lot of people on the left, BLM, they want mental health professionals to respond to literally every single conflict under the sun, and that's super silly. And obviously there's a time and a place for mental health professionals, but if the officers had resources at their disposal to know how to deal with these situations, I think a lot of them would go much better. And of course, the university too, they never really put anything out supporting the police ever. And whenever there's an officer involved shooting on campus in Chicago, in the United States at large, when it becomes a national issue, they're always pushing out an email saying, oh, this is reflective of a much bigger issue. And of course, they never have any real solutions to it, which is, again, really frustrating, very upsetting.
Right. Yeah. And the whole thing with like ACAB too, I don't really know how many people on the left like really support that. But what my hope is, and I've talked to Francisco about this, what my hope is that most conservatives and liberals are moderate, and it's just the craze, like the few crazies that are louder and want to be heard a little bit more. But honestly, in this climate, who knows anymore? I feel like everything's just either far one side or far the other side. So if the majority is moderate, I'd be happy. And I feel like moderates on the left would be more advocating for more money into the police. But then also at the same time, I feel like a lot of moderate liberals try and cater to more radical leftist ideology, so they don't get canceled. I don't know. I think that's a bit of a tangent, but
yeah, I mean,
I hope we're more moderate than we think we are.
Right. I mean, the one thing that does scare me about the left, and this is not singularly on the policing issue, is everything seems to be driven by electability. There's no accountability to their constituents. There's no genuine ideas. For the policing example, everybody was screaming from the rooftops, defund the police. Almost every single Democratic politician under the sun wanted to defund the police. And then it became unattractive to want to defund the police based on the rising crime rates in this country. And now people are flip-flopping. It's the same thing with the border. We saw this in Biden's State of the Union. He had a line where he said, we need to fund the police, secure the border. And he's just saying that because it's politically expedient for him now. 12 months ago, he wasn't saying that. So that's the thing that scares me, is there actually isn't any. I think the people on the far left are actually more genuine in their beliefs than the more moderate liberals. The more moderate liberals, instead of actually being driven by what they believe in, it's just, okay, what's going to keep me in office? What's going to keep me elected?
Right. Yeah. And I know Francisco, I don't know. We've talked about this. We talked about this with Nate Hockman, but him and I both really respected Bernie in that way. Or like, really appreciate that he is a public servant. So kudos to that guy. I think he's really just like advocated for what he's believed in, whether it's true or not. You need more of that in politics on both sides.
Yeah, no. So Arthur, you brought up the border wall. So like I was driving through Chicago last year. I went to Wrigley, and it was like machine gun on machine gun. Like every cop had a machine gun. Why doesn't the border wall look like that? Like, how do you feel about the fact that our country is not taking the border wall seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very strongly about you know, country sovereignty and particularly our southern border. It's mind-numbing to me to watch this happen, and I mean, we can get in and talk more about like Ukraine and military-industrial complex, but we hemorrhage money on our weapons and our soldiers, and either they get sent to other countries who really aren't really relevant to us or our national defense whatsoever, or they just sit and we don't use them. And we have a real national emergency on our southern border. And I mean, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, has done a solid job. And I mean, I don't want to say it's like great or not great because I don't have I'm not too accurate on how I feel about it, but our federal government needs to do way more. This isn't a state issue. There are very few things that I think the federal government should do, but securing the border is one of them. And I mean, I'm all for build the wall, send the army down there. And I mean, it's a double-edged sword. One, it hurts our country, and two, I mean, most of the mainstream media won't cover this, but it's supremely disastrous for all this, the Central and Southern Americans who are trying to get here, and all the it enables the cartels. The idea of human rights is thrown out the window when we have this completely discombobulated immigration system.
Yeah, no, it's we've talked about the cartels a little bit on this pod, and we actually had a recovered heroin addict on as well. So it's no surprise that the drugs that are coming into the United States are coming in through that southern border. And I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I don't think it's a opinion not based in fact. And overdose deaths in our country are skyrocketing. It's sad. It's like, and we have a legitimate way to stop it in securing our border, and we look the other way.
Yeah, and people always want to talk about, I mean, what Americans die from. It's this or that. I mean, and I'm not. I mean, I think you guys know a little bit about my background. I'm not a person who believes in all of the COVID BS, but two of the biggest killers, if you will, in the past year and a half, if you want to call COVID killed that number of people, it's COVID and it's fentanyl, and both of those, there are countries that are responsible for that. There are countries that at the very least are negligent in taking care of those issues, and that's why they've come to harm our people. China certainly with COVID, and then Central and South America with these drugs. And people just want to stand around and say, oh, COVID is bad. The fentanyl, the opioid epidemic, it's bad. Americans are dying every single day. I'm from New York. Obviously, the Northeast is a huge, I mean, the country as a whole, but the Northeast, it's horrible. And people really don't have any solutions. And it's not rocket science. You secure the damn border, you put some people down there who know how to turn people away, and then people in Washington actually can reform the immigration system so it works, and people who need to get here can get here, and they can get here safely. But it's just more kind of political talk, and people actually don't want to do what needs to be done.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. It's tough too, because like there's so many things that could be done to curb it. And I think both sides have some good ideas. Like I think because like end of the day, people will always do heroin. Heroin addicts will always do heroin. And with stricter immigration policies, you can curb that a little bit, or I think probably in a substantial amount. But I think too, like making fentanyl testing kits more accessible is a important thing to kind of introduce, which isn't ideal, I know, because it kind of implies that people will continue to use, but could be helpful.
I'd rather the private sector tackle that than the government. Like I don't think the government should be handing out fentanyl testing kits. I think that's
right, yeah. But I think like why doesn't CVS start just getting after it,
Yeah, no, they definitely should. And like fentanyl, like there are legitimately kids our age that are dying from fentanyl. Like you brought up the Northeast, like this summer was sad. Like the news cycle was filled with it. And the thing for people around our age is like COVID's not going to kill us. Like something like fentanyl is actually more of a direct concern for kids around our age. So like that's why it's so serious. I don't think
100%.
it's taken seriously enough in our country.
I agree. I agree.
Trump,
Kids all the time.
Trump did declare it a national emergency in like 2018, I believe. But I don't know what that means. That's kind of just political rhetoric.
Right. The one funny thing last week, and this guy just shows how out in touch most media outlets are with how American people feel. Was I think it was Mark Esper, I believe. He had a new book, and in the book, Trump was asking some of his defense people whether they could kind of drone strike the cartels in Mexico and kind of blow up all these fentanyl labs and all these cartel hotspots. And I forget what news outlet put it out on Twitter, but they just got completely ratioed, and the responses were overwhelmingly positive. Like, okay, yes, let's do that. Let's stop. Let's blow up these places that are manufacturing drugs that kill our kids. So again, it's just more of how these media elites, these political elites, are so out of touch with what the American people want and how they feel.
Yeah, you're a big misinformation guy too. Like did you see that interview the other day with that woman that said that all the blue check marks should be allowed to go on Twitter and check for content that they agree with?
No, I did not see that.
I'm gonna pull this up and send it to you. But yeah, no, it's the misinformation stuff's really sketchy.
Yeah, it's horrible. And the thing is, it's nice. It's previously been nice that social media has been unregulated, but when I think the people in power see more and more how Twitter and Instagram, how these social media sites can be used as avenues to kind of curtail their power and expose the corruption that's going on, the alarm bells go off and they have to say, oh no, what can we do to censor this? What can we do to kind of stop this from happening? So I think hopefully Elon gets in charge of Twitter and makes it a little better space. Because particularly for me in college, I don't have time to sit down and watch the news. So I get all my news from Twitter. I'm on Twitter all the time. You follow
Arthur, I think I lost you for a second. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think I lost him as well.
Am I back?
Yeah,
you're talking about Twitter. It was like right when you started your point. You were talking about how Twitter is kind of more your news outlet.
Right. Yeah. So I was saying I'm really happy that the Elon can get there and hopefully bring it back to a place where we can kind of have unfettered discourse and dissemination of the news, because I think a lot of people are really upset and disassociated with big media. So I mean, obviously people on the left tend to like MSNBC, CNN, people on the right tend to like Fox News, but at the same time, everybody knows that they blatantly push their own partisan narratives. And I think Twitter is a place where you can kind of break free of that and see what's actually going on. And I really, really hope that with Elon back in charge, that'll be what it is.
Yeah.
People don't talk about the fact that TikTok has like the most market share though. Like people are spending the most time on TikTok right now. TikTok's growing at the fastest rate. And that is something that the United States will never have control over, which is really, really sketchy.
Right. But that I will say though, I'd say the majority of that population is sub 20. And I'm pretty sure there was a point with TikTok and like the federal government worrying about TikTok security. They weren't allowing specific members of the armed forces or certain branches of the government to have TikTok accounts, which I think is really smart. I deleted mine because I mean, I know I'm not doing anything important or anything, but I prefer China not to have all my data.
Yeah, I same. I never downloaded it. I was pretty sketched out when it came out. I'm very, very scared of China and think we need to be very careful. So I never downloaded it. Hate the thing.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I heard from a very reliable friend who wouldn't tell me something fake, and it sounds very real, so I imagine that it is real. But he was saying that China is blocking all discourse about COVID on their internet, so you can't talk. And I mean, that sounds 100% true, but it's crazy. I mean, that's just an obvious human rights violation, and China's like second most powerful country in the world, so pretty terrifying.
Can our government do that though? That would make my my feed way less annoying if I just like all Twitter stuff was just or COVID stuff was just blocked.
Well, you can mute words. You can mute keywords, Francisco. I don't know if you know that, but if you go on Twitter, you can mute COVID if you want to.
May have to do that because COVID's dead.
Yeah,
So,
I will say though, especially with the war on Ukraine, I got so much information from Twitter, and I really respect the company and I think they were doing a solid job before Elon, but I think Elon will really open Twitter up as kind of like this unfiltered media app.
Twitter is elite. Like Twitter is actually the place where I find like my favorite thinkers. Like the way people are able to communicate their thoughts with like the 250 character framework is the best for my like attention span, and then I can learn from there. But most of like the thoughts I have start with Twitter and what I read there.
absolutely. I think Twitter's brilliant, particularly for us guys in college and I think just young professionals. We're so busy that, and I love reading well-written articles, novel articles, but I don't necessarily have the time throughout the day. So if somebody sends me an article, I'll just kind of push it off till later, maybe read it before bed when the day's over. But for Twitter, you can get on there, refresh, and take 5 minutes and you'll know what's going on, what's important. But it is important, like you said, you follow the thinkers that you like. It's important to follow the right people, because I mean, there are a lot of bad people out there, but you can pretty easily find who the right ones are.
Right. Yeah. And I think what people have been struggling with recently that people understand on Twitter but don't understand when they watch the news is that on Twitter, it's like you have to be able to think for yourself and say, oh, I just read this thing. It could be true. It could be an opinion, and it could show half of a truth. And then they don't really have that same thinking when it comes to the news, where the news is like itself, it seems all these correspondents are just op-ed columns, whereas they're not really like, here are the facts, and I'm not telling you what I think about them. Because that's what, I mean, I know old heads like our parents, I'm sure, have talked about, oh, the news used to be this, and it's very true. The news used to be, here's what's happening. And now it's, here's what's happening, here's what I think about it, or here's what the CEO of whatever, CNN, Fox thinks about it. So I think Twitter people are more perceptive and understand a little bit more that they see these things and then they formulate their own opinions.
Arthur, do you invest at all?
No, not really.
Because Twitter is great for investing too. Like I get a lot of my best investing tips from Twitter. We're trying to get into the like investing space on like this pod, but not entirely. Like we don't pretend to be experts or anything like that, but we get a lot of our like ideas from Twitter, which is nice.
Okay, good to know for the future. Yeah, I'm definitely not your guy on the investing front though.
So what you said you're a history major. I'm also a history major. What are your like your key areas of study?
So my focus is, so I haven't really embarked super deep on it because at Chicago we have a pretty vibrant core curriculum. You take classes in basically everything your first and second years, but early American, basically revolution, pre-revolution up through the Civil War, and I've done a good bit of Renaissance, Enlightenment, political thought as well.
Okay, so that's kind of our wheelhouse.
Great.
Who's your favorite founder?
Wow, that's a tough question. I mean, it's tough. Favorite's tough. I think they all have a lot to offer. I do really like Madison. For a class last year, we read Madison's notes on the convention, and I think that's a really indispensable source on what they were thinking, and kind of to see the differences between the founders on how they think the Constitution and the United States should be conceived. So I think right now I'd probably go with Madison, but that could be different in a month. I like them all.
Are you familiar with Federalist paper number 10?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So Madison's fascinating too, because people, I don't think, give him enough credit for the fact that he came up with the House and Senate system. Like that was his brain trust, I feel like. And who do you have present it again? Or did he present it and someone else came up with it?
I don't know the answer to that. Oh, I think Hamilton might have presented it.
Right. I mean, I think, yeah, I think Hamilton argued it. But I mean, Federalist 10 is written by Madison, so.
Yeah, no, Federalist 10 isn't about the House and Senate, I believe, but so he came up with the Virginia plan, which was that the House would be in terms of population size and the Senate would be equal representation. And we can fact check who wrote it, but that system has stood since. Like the fact that he came up with that is pretty revolutionary. And was Madison from Virginia?
Yeah, I believe so.
He was the one that made the capital agreement with Hamilton, or was that Jefferson?
He's from Virginia, by the way, I think.
Yeah. He's from Virginia. I'm not sure on the on the capital question. But I mean, just on the Federalist 10, briefly, I mean, I love Federalist 10. It's not many people understand how groundbreaking, like that was a very novel analysis on how to reconcile kind of individual interests versus community interests. And I mean, throughout political history, that is a very pressing question. And his analysis of that in Federalist 10 is really spot on. And I mean, that's another thing too, that a quarrel that I have with, I mean, just education as a whole. I mean, I think when my parents were in high school, like my mom went to public high school, my dad didn't, but they were reading all of that in high school. I just don't know now how many I did, but I didn't go to public high school. I just don't know how prevalent that is, but that's something that every American student should be reading.
Yeah, and that goes back to what you were talking about with the like famous English thinkers like Locke and because the point of government for them was to protect human beings from themselves and to allow people that lived in a conscious way to society to be able to live prosperously and freely. And like that's exactly what all the founders tried to accomplish. And it goes back to their understanding of these great like thinkers. Like it comes back to their understanding great literature and their understanding the way people at that time understood human civilization, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a great point, and people love to shit on all of these guys, but it's just an incredible collection of men, and people will get it on you about it when you try to praise them and talk about how smart they were. But these guys were brilliant. They were incredibly well read across all fields. I mean, you look at some of their backgrounds and the education that they had, and the amount of work that they put in. They read everything, all Enlightenment political thought, Renaissance political thought, classical political thought, Greece and Rome. They had it all down, and that's why the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, they're so beautiful, is because it's an amalgamation of all those ideas. They saw what had gone wrong in the past, and they certainly recognized that man has a proclivity to be bad, and they created a system of government, while imperfect, does the best job of kind of restraining man's man's nature, the bad parts of it, and protecting the things that need to be protected.
Yeah, well, kind of going off of like nature, I know we referenced Hobbes and Locke, but in Federalist 51, Madison has a great line that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. So, I mean, it's a short one, but it's one to remember. Madison hit the nail on the head.
Hit the nail on the head, and that's something that should be repeated daily, I think, in today's political discourse, because I think a fundamental difference between the right and the left overall is just their conception of man and what his natural, his nature is. I think conservatives tend to believe that in Hobbesian, like man can be incredibly bad, and life, when divorced from civil society, can be nasty, brutish, and short. Whereas I think many people on the left are just straining and believing that you can have this perfect society, this utilitarian society, and that's just not possible. And I think obviously it's good to strive for perfection, but you also have to live in reality.
Yeah. Sorry, government, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you see that in Locke and Hobbes's differences in their depiction of human nature. So yeah, one's more based on like tolerance and hope almost, which is ironic that, not even ironic, it makes sense that was Obama's campaign poster for the longest time. And then the other, nasty, brutish, and short, which is a good thing to remember for dinner parties and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's the second time it's been quoted on the pod too. So we're at least we're talking about the right stuff if that's been quoted by two separate guests.
Yeah, and there are a ton of things wrong with Hobbes, but he got that right for sure.
There's a ton of things wrong with everyone. Like, I'm not even sure what was wrong with Madison. I'm sure he was probably a slave owner. So that was something that people probably disagree with. But no, the founders are fascinating people. But like looking to today, we have to live in the world we're in now. And one way that we kind of get to escape reality, and we talk a lot on this book about literature that we read. So Arthur, we're just curious, like, what are your interests in terms of reading? Like, who do you read? Who are your favorite authors? What are your favorite books?
Sure. So, I mean, right during the school, I used to have so much reading during the school year. I'm not able to do a lot of free reading between football, class, keeping up to date on the news. So, I mean, in terms of school, yeah, life of a history major, exactly. In terms of school, some of the things I've read recently for class that I really like. I'm Catholic, and I'm taking a course on natural law, and we read a lot of Aquinas. I really like Aquinas. I think it's the most logical writing that I've ever read. So I like him a lot. And then I'd say one of my classes last quarter, we read some Machiavelli. And well, I don't think he's right on everything. I think he's a very interesting guy. Outside of that, my favorite book, and for anybody watching this podcast, if you don't have it, go out and buy it, is My Grandfather's Son. It's Clarence Thomas's memoir, Justice Clarence Thomas. And I think he's the greatest living American. I think everybody should know his story. Basically grew up with a single mother in literally a shack in Georgia, and through hard work and faith, he went to Yale Law School and ascended to the Supreme Court. And it's kind of a stunning portrayal of, despite your circumstances in America, and obviously he dealt with a ton of racism, and people love to talk about race, and I think it approaches race in a very honest way, but also one that recognizes that, in America, you're certainly a lot of advantages that you wouldn't be anywhere else. So it's called My Grandfather's Son by Clarence Thomas. Highly recommend it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's been added to the list. I've never read that, and I love Clarence Thomas too. I think Reagan appointed him, correct?
Bush.
Bush.
Bush did, but Reagan appointed him to be like an assistant civil.
Yes. Yeah. So he started the EEOC, and that was Reagan. That's correct.
Yeah, you were kind of right, Francisco. That's been untouched on my bookshelf for a long time, so I'll have to get on that. And you know what? Memoirs are kind of slept on a little bit.
100%. Memoirs are sick. Wait, memoir? What's the difference between a memoir and an autobiography?
It's more like novelesque. Like it's stylistically, it's so much more interesting than an autobiography, and it's more like story and like it's more anecdotal than like an autobiography is so much more like cut and dry.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there's a very specific difference, but I mean, I feel like that's a key one.
Yeah, no. So we read a lot of different stuff. Government. Have you read any Michael Lewis?
I have not.
Okay, you've read Gladwell though, right?
Yeah.
Gladwell and Michael Lewis probably my top two like current authors. I obviously we're huge Ayn Rand people. I know you said you haven't read any of her stuff, but are familiar with her. But you brought up you're Catholic. Have you read any C.S. Lewis?
Yeah. So I mean, I obviously the OG Narnia stuff. I haven't read. It's on my list. But I know he has some really really good stuff that you can read when you're older. I obviously read the Narnia stuff when I was little. And Hillsdale College, which is, I mean, I think one of the best colleges in terms of what they actually teach. They have a big, they've probably one of the better professors on C.S. Lewis in the country. So definitely something to get to. Have you guys read some of his later stuff?
Yeah, I just finished Four Loves a few weeks ago, and then I'm cranking through Mere Christianity too, like just a little by little. I'm not treating that as like my main book right now, but yeah, I finished Four Loves. Four Loves is really good, and I just like the way he writes because he ties in like scripture with theology, or not scripture with like philosophy, and it's kind of a cool way to read a book if you understand that interpretation. Because some people would read that and it wouldn't make sense to them, but if you're like if you're someone that believes in God and believes in Jesus Christ, like the way he writes makes sense to you.
Right. Well, I will say though, a recommendation for a memoir is called Tibetan Peach Pie by Tom Robbins. He grew up in Appalachia, and he kind of talks about like the politics at the time and his philosophy and kind of what he learned along the way. But it's he was because Francisco and I both really like to write, and I'm sure you're the same, but Tom Robbins really left a mark on me stylistically. His use of the comma is kind of like how I've developed my use of the comma, which you realize can like shift and change so much, even though it's just like one form of punctuation or like pause. But he's a very funny writer, and someone that's really easy to read. So I'd recommend Tom Robbins' Tibetan Peach Pie. It's a good memoir.
Yeah, government's also being modest too. He has like a novelette or a collection of short stories. How would you categorize it out?
Collection of short stories, I'd say.
Yeah, it's called Eat My Shorts. This is a shameless plug for Eat My Shorts, but check it out on Amazon.
Yeah, 100%.
There you go. Check it out.
Yeah. No, but what other books you read? I'm sure we've all read a similar book because me and government are pretty well read, I would say, for our age.
Yeah, you talk more kind of like political. Well, I mean, I could go just like super easy. Like I'm sure like 1984. Animal Farm. I love Orwell.
What'd you say, Francisco?
I was inquiring about The Alchemist.
Oh, that's a good one, Arthur. You got to get on that if you haven't. The Alchemist.
Wow. Yeah. I've not read that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you got to read that. But yeah, no, Orwell is good. I can't say I've ever read 1984, which is pretty sad. But Animal Farm's classic.
Yeah.
not reading 1984 is kind of an embarrassing statement on the U.S. education system.
Character flaw. No, I'm sure I was assigned it at one point. I just can't say I sat down and read it.
But maybe it wasn't assigned on purpose.
Yeah, fair. I will say though, my favorite high school book, and I know it's like almost cliche, but I think her writing was so good, was Catcher in the Rye. I just thought that was such an amazing book. A weird one, but it was good. It's a reread. Like I remember reading in high school and like freshman year and not really appreciating it. But if you could reread it in less than a week, like a day or two, and oh my God, it's such a good read.
Yeah.
What about like Goggins or like Jordan P? Do you read 12 Rules?
Okay. So I got into Peterson a little late, just like earlier this year. Actually, I saw him about a month ago in Chicago. A huge fan. I haven't read him yet. But 12 Rules is on the list. Goggins is on the list. Jocko's was Extreme Ownership. That's on the list.
That's all one. My brother goes to Navy, and Jocko comes by and talks to his class all the time. He says he's such a badass. But I will say, and Francisco, I haven't told you this yet, and this might be news to you guys. And I meant to tell it to our other guest, Maddo, because I know he loves him. But people in the Navy don't really like Goggins.
No, Goggins is an asshole, dude. Like Goggins must have been such a pain in the ass in the force. Like I love Goggins. I think his book truly sculpts the way you think. Like when you are working out now after reading Goggins, you can't have the same thought process because he pretty much just like tells you you're like soft.
Yeah, but an interesting thing about that though is he is kind of seen as a checklist guy, a guy that like never really went and served and like did all the tours that a lot of those guys did. Instead, he was like, okay, I was a SEAL. Now I'm going to become a Ranger. Now I'm going to do this, which is not to like bring that down. That's so impressive. And I couldn't do that shit, but I don't know. Just that's the Navy community.
I can see that. It's a good book. Like it's really like it's one of those books similar to the way you were talking about Clarence Thomas's memoir, in the fact that you read that book, you really can't feel bad about your situation. Like some people are dealt crazy hands in the United States of America, and people are dealt crazy hands across the world, but it's really just what you make of them. And that's kind of just the premise of that book. It's along the lines of like all those self-help memoirs, because people do have incredible stories. And that's one of the reasons why we have a spot. Hopefully we can get some cool people on here too. Maybe we'll have some stories like that one day. But no, it's dude, no, that's why I just love reading. I wish I read my assignments more in college though. Like if you're actually reading what they're assigning you, like sometimes they assign some good stuff. Like I just like, as soon as I got home from class, the backpack was just not getting open. So
yeah, I mean that's the one thing. I mean, Chicago does have its downfalls, but I mean there are so many positives, and the stuff that I've been assigned here, I think I've only read. In a class, I've only read one thing where I'm like, okay, this is trash. Everything else I've loved and taken some value from it. I mean, it's great. Like one of my courses, we have these sequences. So every student has to do these sequences. So one of them is called a Soch sequence. And the one that I take, it's called Classics of Social and Political Thought. So you start off, and the first quarter you read Plato's Republic,
all time,
Aristotle, the Politics. You read Aquinas, the Summa. You read Machiavelli, The Prince. Then the next quarter it's Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau. And then this quarter we did Tocqueville, we did Marx, Nietzsche, and then Du Bois. So it's just, I mean, those great books, you have to read them. I don't know. I don't think you can say you had a good educational experience if you haven't read those books. And I don't know how many colleges across the country still do it. And a lot of people, particularly in academia now, have turned their nose down at the Western canon. But I mean, there's a reason why the Western canon is Western canon, and you need to read it.
Yeah, and we talked about that with Hockman, but I will say that what the liberal arts does a really good job on, if you are focused in those areas in terms of like political philosophy is you read the primary sources. And if I would argue that you can't really have good opinions. That's such a hot take, but I'm going to say it anyway. You can't really have strong or good opinions unless you've read the classics. And I will say though, I'm glad that you threw Marx in there, because I read Marx and Engels, like big book. I forget what it's called, but it had all of their works in it, and you realize how smart those guys were. But then you also realize, like, wow, this is why they're wrong. This is why I don't agree with them. And they make a lot of good points. Marx had some good criticism surrounding capitalism, but he ultimately just like couldn't really figure out an alternative. So yeah. I mean, you learn to really like respect all these other opinions and then learn how to argue against them or argue for them.
Absolutely, because all the stuff now is built out of the stuff in the past. Like, so we just finished up Nietzsche, earlier this week, and I mean, I see the whole kind of postmodernist, ideas of postmodernism, got the birth of moral relativism, it's got widespread secularism, all of that as roots in these earlier writings. And I agree with you on Marx. I mean, I read last year Engels on the working conditions of England, and I loved it. I mean, it wasn't super. I love that. Yeah. Really, really good. I mean, be very good writer.
I took a Marxism class. I'd really recommend it. Yeah. But anyways, memoirs are awesome. Books are awesome. Everyone should read. It's a good use of your time, and it's better than scrolling through TikTok. So
yeah, it's lifting for your brain.
Arthur, how much do you get into the Word? Like you mentioned, you were Catholic. How often do you would you say you read the Bible?
Yeah, honestly, I really don't read the Bible all that much. That's kind of cap. I mean, growing up, yes. I mean, I feel like I know it really, really well, just from going to mass every Sunday, and going through Catholic education, religious formation. It's interesting. I mean, I know there are Catholics who do it, but at least a lot of the Catholics my age, it's opposed to other branches of Christianity. It's not like where you have a Bible open every day and you read a Bible verse. So I mean, I'm very, very familiar with it, but it's not something that I read very frequently. I think more so I go to mass on Sunday. You have the readings, you have the gospel, and then also, I mean, starting to do more of this just because Aquinas I really, really liked is just reading more Catholic theology and these theologians' thoughts on various issues. They're obviously very, very bright people, and it's nice to see when your religious views and people that are well regarded in your faith have thoughts, and really novel thoughts on politics, social life, literally everything under the sun.
Yeah, no, I don't know what got me into it. Actually, someone that isn't religious at all. He took a gap year last year, and he like dedicated himself to like reading the Bible, and that kind of like inspired me to like dive into it a little bit, because it is like we talked about Hobbes and Locke, but like the Bible's even more central to human behavior, I think, and than any of those works. So yeah, no, I've been trying to read it a bunch, and it's just fascinating. Like obviously the Hobbes and Locke stuff have relevance, but you'll read something from 2000 BC and it's just completely relevant. And it's just, or not 2000, but like 900 BC. It's ridiculous. So I was just curious how much you get into it, but yeah, no, we talked to some people from a lot of different religions on here, but it's cool to have a Catholic on here that takes his faith seriously.
Yeah, and it's you talked a little bit about kind of the loss of religiosity in America with Nate, but I mean, people go back and forth on this all the time, and people get really worked up about the separation of church and state, and it's a big discussion, I think, when it comes to the founders and what they believed. But it's really, really, really hard to divorce America, Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, from Judeo-Christian ideals. And like you said, the Bible has so much relevant stuff. Yeah, I mean, this is why it's important to study history and read the early stuff, is because like I said, everything's an outgrowth of that. And I think, America was founded on Judeo-Christian ideals. I don't think you can have an America divorced from religion. I think an America divorced from religion is a really bad looking America. I think it's an America that it's what America is increasingly looking like, which is sad.
Yeah, when Congress ended that thing last year with amen and woman, that was like one of the most pathetic things I've ever heard.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, and these are separate too. I mean, we could get into like Ukraine or other kind of topics, but like Roe v. Wade right now. I mean, the abortion issue, and this is obviously a very volatile issue, and people get really upset when they talk about it. As a Catholic, I feel very strongly a certain way. But I think just the way that our country has moved on this topic is, I mean, people I think there's an inherent natural need for religion in man, and when people aren't religious, they seek to fill that void in other ways, negative ways. Our culture does that, and that you see that with this response to Roe v. Wade and abortion. I mean, that's a purely legal decision, and now you have people on the streets who, I mean, California almost passed a bill for infanticide. There are people who support abortion who are openly want to kill babies. It used to be people that talked about abortion as a tragedy, it's sad. Now there's so many people on the pro-abortion side of the aisle who literally just want to kill babies. And I can't help but notice that has gone hand in hand with a lack of faith, a lack of belief in God, and people just continually having this disdain for organized religion.
Yeah, no. So we have a conservative poli-sci professor here that gives talks to the Catholic community once a week, and he talks about the early Christian church and how it grew, and part of that growth process was holding life in a higher standard. Other pagan cultures or other cultures would throw babies in the river. If they had a girl and they wanted a guy, they wouldn't even know. They would just throw them in the river. And that's the Catholic tradition, or the Christian tradition, is that this predated Catholicism, but the Christian tradition holding lives in a high standard led to that crazy early growth. I think the stat is in 100 AD, there was 500 believers or 1,000 believers. And then by 500 or 1,000 AD, there was 1 million. And part of that was because they had a culture that was, and that what that meant, holding life in high regard, that also meant holding woman in high regard. Woman would contribute to helping with the sick. There was a plague, and the Christian community was able to grow because women were put in a role to take care of people. And when people feel like there's someone that has a vested interest in their survival, they're more likely to survive. And these are some of the things that the early Christian church did that led to their growth. And it's just sad to see a country trying to stray away from that, because I think the United States is the most prosperous country of all time, but killing babies seems like it's the path to less prosperity. I can't imagine in any society where that leads to better outcomes.
Yeah, and just briefly on that, this literally made me sick. Was Janet Yellen was testifying before the Senate after the Roe v. Wade leak came out, and Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, Black dude, was questioning Yellen, and she was saying something. She was talking very callously about the economic effects of abortion and how it was positive for the economy for it to have unfettered access to abortion, because women, presumably, according to her, would be more involved in the workforce. And it's when a society starts talking like that, when people in power start talking like that, it's really, really scary. And Tim Scott had a great response to it, which I encourage everybody to go watch. But the whole narrative around life nowadays is really depressing. I don't think you can be a good moral society if you kill the most innocent people among you, and I think that's a big contention we have in our society, and it's very scary and does not look good for our future.
Government, you were the one that showed me that graphic with like our peer group when it came to abortion laws, right? Like it was like us, North Korea, Singapore, China. Like that's just not great company to be keeping when it comes to any like domestic policy.
Yeah, I think it was the strictness of the strictness versus the openness of abortion laws, and it was by week. And we were on the higher end, depending where you were in the US, but we were generally on the higher end, closer to like China rather than like most European countries, or are like sub 16 weeks, whereas the US is a lot higher than in a general sense.
And Arthur, you mentioned that Yellen clip. That was the one where she also said that it would. Oh no, yeah, you were talking about it. It would increase the economy, it would increase the workforce. But like, how short-sighted is that line of thinking? It's like, how is abortion going to help the workforce in any long-term sense? It's like Janet Yellen. I don't know how old you are, but there's going to be like a country when you are gone. Like, we don't like.
Yeah, but I would argue.
Workforce
I would argue though that that many abortions where that would be true. Like I'm not advocating for what she said, obviously, but I wouldn't argue that you're stripping the future American workforce, because the amount of abortions is like so minimal in terms of percentages.
But like, look what happened in China. Like China probably would want to go to war with Taiwan right now, but their demographic is messed up because they killed too many people. Or not kill, or yeah, they killed too many people, like too many babies.
They had child policies though, so it was different. I mean, they wanted, a lot of Chinese families, when they had a kid, when it was a girl, they were like, shit, I wanted a boy. If I can only have one child. And then they moved it to two children. But that's why they were like off the charts in terms of like giving away babies or kind of just like throwing them away almost.
That is fair. It's not apples and oranges.
Yeah. So I'd just be wary when comparing that. But what she said is like so absurd that you're going to put like an economic value on life.
Yeah, and there is too with the abortion. I mean, we could see this in like a variety of different topics, and this is the one thing that, I mean, so many conservatives, not all, because there are people who got it 100% right, but when people kind of more towards the middle talk about how there is no slippery slope on a variety of these issues, social issues in particular, whether it be abortion, guns, whatever you want, marriage, it's no slippery slope. And like I was talking about the rhetoric where it used to be a tragedy, now to people just openly like calling for killing babies. It's also just the way abortion is thought. Now people, if it's going to come down to, okay, I wanted a boy, we can now tell the gender of the child in the womb, okay, kill that child. Or, I mean, they do this, I think it's in the Netherlands now, is if you have a child and they can tell the child has Down syndrome, that child is getting killed. It's the most disgusting, callous. I think abortion is the most important moral issue of our time.
Do you think that there are any exceptions, or do you think that there's a time frame cutoff, or no?
Yeah, I personally don't. As a Catholic, I believe life begins at conception and ends at natural death. And I mean, it's euthanasia, I'm completely against as well. So it doesn't matter. Rape, personhood is a gift from God. Rape, incest, that doesn't take away from it. I don't know. I don't understand how something so horrible as rape or incest, you would then continue something so horrible as killing that precious innocent child. I don't get it. I know people who aren't religious find it hard to accept that, but the one thing that I'm very happy about when it comes to abortion is the more advanced in science we get, the better it looks for the pro-life movement, because you can see when a baby can feel pain, when the heart is beating, you can really see the personhood in the womb. And I think that'll only continue, which is going to be very good.
Right. Yeah. And I think what a lot of people say that are kind of like in the middle between pro-life and pro-choice is, as that science has developed, it's kind of shown like the heartbeat starts, I don't know exactly, but I think it's between like 11 and 12 weeks. So I think people are making more strict cutoffs to abortion. But I will say, you referenced euthanasia and natural death, and one of my grandparents, she kind of elected, I guess she didn't elect because she was in really bad shape. But when it comes to natural death, and I guess this is more of a philosophical question about like technological progress, but when you're keeping someone that like naturally, someone that would have died naturally, and you just see them hooked up to like all these tubes, do you think that that's not natural death? Because like it's very tough to say, like I was very against euthanasia before the instance of my grandmother, but she would have passed away like 10 years before, and then she was just stuck in a bed for 10 years and like couldn't talk. So
yeah, I mean, I think being hooked up to, you know, an advanced technological machine that prolongs your life, you know, seemingly indefinitely, that's not natural to me. So I think taking somebody off a respirator, or, you know, having a DNR, you know, do not resuscitate, that is not the same as, you know, killing somebody who you know, it would live fine on their own. I mean, and that's what you see in the Netherlands, you know, in the Pacific Northwest. I forget if it's Oregon or Washington or both, but I mean, you've people who are, you know, depressed, or, you know, they have no will to live anymore, and it's legal assisted suicide.
Right. So yeah, I guess your argument would be, and I'm like trying to help you with this. So if you were to ever take like a philosophy of life class or something like that, or ethics of life, I think it would be more of your argument would rest on like a killing versus letting die, in terms of euthanasia. So like it would not be, it wouldn't explicitly be like killing, you know, it would be just letting die. So it's more of a natural, it would adhere to Christian values, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think natural death is pretty cut and dry. If you're hooked up to a machine that's prolonging your life, that's not natural. So.
Yeah, I agree. Advancement is weird. Sometimes I come to a point of, like, even with like social media and stuff too, it's like how much progress is too much progress. And it is kind of a rabbit hole to go down, but it can occasionally be an interesting thing to think about.
Definitely. Well, we're coming up on the hour mark. Arthur, we talk a lot about globalism on the pod, so I think we'll let's wrap up with globalism, but we'd love to get your take on it. Like, it's obviously a really weird time in foreign affairs. It's a weird time in domestic like policy. Like, what do you think the future is for globalism? What do you see the United States' role in the future being?
Yeah, great question. Globalism is definitely a thing. I mean, you can see it with, I think, almost every single, you know, foreign policy issue, and a lot of domestic issues as well. I mean, just this week, we passed the 40 billion in aid for Ukraine. You have Mitch McConnell saying, I think almost verbatim, you know, we can all agree that, you know, Ukraine is the biggest issue of the day. You had the House Majority Leader, Representative Hoyer. He said, again verbatim, we're at war right now. I mean, these people have. I mean, a ton of Republicans do this too. So it's not just people on the left side of the aisle. There's just no real allegiance to America anymore. You know, Western Europe, I think, is done. The formation of the EU, the World Economic Conference. I'm not a United Nations person at all. I think we really need to kind of withdraw from a lot of these multinational organizations and see what their motives really are. The foreign aid thing really bothers me. I mean, we hemorrhaged, you know, trillions of dollars in Afghanistan. We left, and look what happened. We don't know where this money is going. Senator Paul from Kentucky, he was just asking for, you know, a quick explanation of where all the money's going. Nobody knew where it was going. Sure, Russia, okay, Russia's bad, Putin's bad. I'm fine with that, but we don't really know a whole lot about Ukraine either. There's a ton of corruption in Ukraine. And again, kind of like before I was talking about these, multinational organizations, the WHO and COVID, completely botched that. The whole vaccine rollout. It's a lot of this stuff is really, really connected, and I think we do need to start having a much more inward focus, because our politicians should have the American people's interests at heart first and foremost. I think America for years, ever since our founding, we have kind of been the moral, civilizing force in the world, if you will. But I think now lines are really getting blurred, and we're losing our identity as America. And I just really hope that voters and Americans wake up, because people are going to continue to hand out this money and not think about our country if people don't bring it to the forefront and raise issues on it.
Yeah, no, America's played a really fascinating role, especially since 45. Like, since World War II ended, the United States is, like, what they're doing with Ukraine. Like, United States has been doing that everywhere, pretty much. Like, anyone that they really kind of rocked with, they would just send money their way, and sometimes they would send men their way. And that's, like, my biggest fear with the Ukraine Russia stuff. Like, that rhetoric that the politicians are talking about, that's rhetoric that will eventually send United States soldiers into Ukraine. And it's scary, because I feel like there's a disregard for human life, American lives, and like those people that are fighting. Like, we've had some people on the pod that are enlisting, and they just have a deep love for this country. I don't think that their love is being respected necessarily.
Yeah, I will add though, and this isn't like a real point, but I will add that those motherfuckers want to go kill some Russians, which is not advocating for deploying them in these places, but if that happens, they might.
Are you saying those MFs? Those are the enlisted guys?
Yeah. And you know what? They're all these.
I don't know.
I'd say I know. I'm sure maybe I'm not saying you know them. I'm sure that they do. That's definitely not how everybody feels. I know guys enlisted as well, and all of them would disagree with that sentiment. So I don't think that's widespread throughout the military. I don't really have a way of measuring that, but at least from the guys that I know and the way that I think, I don't think that they really do. But
yeah, I led with not a real point, but a lot of the guys, if you're in the Marine Corps, you want to kill someone.
Dude, you're gonna get canceled, government. Especially that coming out of the government. That's crazy.
I mean, you know what? The government is all about it.
The government needs the Marines to want to kill people, though. Like, they need someone.
Well, I don't want a Marine that's going to faint at the sight of blood. I mean, obviously, those are the tech guys, but
I feel really strongly that killing people who want to kill you, to rape your women, to destroy your country, killing those people is a noble and good thing. That's awesome.
Has been forever too. That's universal. Like that stuff. Like, when Elon got the Twitter deal, he tweeted like, what's best in life, and it's like conquering land, and like I don't know, like that is universal to the human condition. Like, people try to have their beliefs put on different areas, and you hope that those beliefs are grounded in something like religion and something like that, because there are moral battles that are fought. Like, I think a lot of what goes on in Israel, we've had some Israelis on here. Like, I think that is along moral grounds, and it's just a fundamental difference in opinion and beliefs. But yeah, no, it's tough.
I will say, Francisco, that is I would tiptoe around that statement, because morals have led to like justifying wars and slavery and stuff like that. So obviously,
like a biblical moral compass, no, but like Hitler's moral compass, yeah. Like, if like his moral compass, like, that would not be like rationalized by any famous literature. Like that was his theory, and like he ran with it, and like it just proves how infallible, or not how infallible, but how fallible men are, and like how fallible men's belief systems can become if they become degraded enough.
Yeah, and one quick thing, just government, because what you said about the Marines was interesting. It's interesting to reconcile that with this movement within the military. And I have friends who are at academies right now, and I mean we all see it. Is this movement's kind of reduce the masculinity, inject gender and race theory into our military and just emasculate them and stop, instead of having a badass fighting force who's going to kill people and kill them well, we're just kind of getting degraded. And obviously other countries aren't doing that, but that's something that I'm very worried about, and I know a lot of guys in the service are worried about. So yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, no disrespect to the LGBT community, but I do not want you fighting for my country. In different ways, sure, like healthcare, yeah, go for it, other sectors. But when it comes to the military, I want a Louisiana boy that has been taking PEDs and playing high school football and decided to go to the Marines because he tore his ACL and wasn't able to play college football. That's who I want serving my country. I don't think that that's controversial.
No, and the worst part about the whole woke movement in the military too is woman in battle is not a thing. Like what's the term for that, government? It's just not a real concept.
Yeah, I mean, maybe who's that swimmer? I think she could serve for us. Leah Thomas. She could serve. She is probably in really good shape, but everyone else, I mean, I'm okay with, obviously, like I'm okay with women in the military, but I mean, they're not going to be SEALs or anything. Like they're probably going to be, because for a long time, the highest rank that a woman could hold in the Navy was through military police, and that wasn't a sexist thing. That was simply because they didn't want them, if they got captured, they did not want their female soldiers getting like raped or tortured in that way. So it's not, I mean, wokeness needs to stay out of the military, 100%.
Yeah, just let's leave it to corporations. Like, let them do it. I don't even care. I'm gonna choose which ones to buy anyway. Like, if you have a really good product, I could care less about your transgender colored like mug. But no, it is brutal. Like, it's just everywhere. You can't avoid it. It's just frustrating. But no, going back to globalism, and like I guess conquest. C.S. Lewis actually in his book does this section on nationalism. It's really good. And it's like the way to have like a faith-centered, like the way to be a faith-centered soldier. And I forget, I think it was either Augustine or Constantine, but people were converting to the faith and they were sending him letters saying, how can I be a soldier and follow God? And these are like famous correspondents. I'm not too familiar with them. I just heard about them at that lecture I was telling you about. But it's interesting that like there are, I guess, great thinkers' opinions on what nationalism should look like, and some of them are not based in like very like disrespectful ways. Like people take nationalism with a negative connotation. I don't think that should necessarily be the case.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's one of my main issues. One of my biggest pet peeves is the idea that being a nationalist is a bad thing. It's not. It means that you think that, I mean, you love your country and you think that your country is superior to other countries. I certainly believe that about America, and I think I would hope that all Americans do. If you're a patriot, that's what you should believe. Yeah, I'd call myself a nationalist every single day of the week and twice on Sunday. It's not a bad thing.
I like that.
I like that. I think we should end there too, because that's just amazing. Like twice, I'm a nationalist, twice on Sunday. Yeah, it's fair. I agree with it. But no, it's first off, Arthur, it was a pleasure to have you on, and I think you should come on again when we have some certain topics you want to talk about, or whenever something's on your mind. Definitely feel free to hop on the space. But this was a blast.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This is a lot of fun. I'm glad you guys are doing this. We definitely need more of this, in the world. if everybody could come and have conversations like these, I think our country would be in a much better place.
No, definitely. And feel free to share this with whoever. We're eventually going to make this more mainstream. Like, we're going to get better audio and a better setup, probably eventually start showing our faces. We're just waiting till we get a bachelor's degree in hand before we really start showing the face.
All right. Well, once you get it, show it, because it's important, particularly for other people. I mean, I was coming into college, being a conservative. I wasn't necessarily scared, but I mean, being on a college campus and kind of being outspoken about the things you believe in, if you're on the right side of the aisle, is a little intimidating. And when other people see other people doing it, it just people become more comfortable doing it. So I think it's super important.
100%. Well, Arthur, thank you. Government, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I'm just echoing what Francisco said, man. We really appreciated your time. Really insightful, and it was great getting to know you. I feel like it's always nice with this pod, because whenever Francisco brings some people he knows on, it's like after the episode, it's like I've known this guy for a while. If I saw him in the bar, I'd be happy to see him. So it was nice to gain a bud today. So appreciate it, man.
Likewise, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and shout out to listeners. Keep tuning in. We'll keep putting some good content out. Well, thank you guys. See ya.
All right, take care, fellas.